Hi. Hello. All right, I'm here, and so is the Wonder Cat, feral cat Ted. Okay, and there's lots of questions, so I'm going to get started. Hi, Mrs. Madeline says, your opinion on this. My eating disorder has felt like a self-destruct disease. What if rather than famine response directly causing eating disorders are more of a self-destruct mechanism due to a stressor? Well, I think generally the thing about organisms is that generally they don't want to self-destruct, because if you think about it, if organisms wanted to self-destruct, then they wouldn't survive. Like imagine if trees, right, for example, trees were just like, let's have a self-destruct thing. And then they just all started blowing up. And then there would be no trees. And then everything would die. That would be a problem. So I don't know that Mother Nature would have built that in. There are some things I wish would self-destruct, like wasps. But no, not even the things that you just think are completely useless and need to self-destruct, not even they have a self-destruct. So I think what we have to do when we're thinking about these things is we have to look for examples in other species, and most species don't self-destruct. So good theory, interesting, but just think that most species kind of want to stay alive. That's why Teddy decided to be a house cat, isn't it, Teddy? Because Teddy realized that there's much greater chance of staying alive if the human feeds him. He's very smart. And if he just puts up with me, then he gets really nice food. And so even cats especially are good at survival and adapting to better their chances of survival. All right. Kim says, hi, Tabs. I just want to say thanks. Went cold turkey on compulsive exercise for more than a month now. Well done, Kim. Rafi says, how to challenge timing rules. I always feel super stressed when I eat later than the time I planned in my head because I want to have a certain time in between meals. Yeah, timing rules can just cause all sorts of fucked upness in your head. My timing rules were all more about I've got to eat as late as possible. It wasn't like I wasn't bothered about the space between eating. In fact, I pushed back eating so late that if I ate all of my food in a 3-hour period at the end of the day, I'd feel happy about that. But work with plenty of people that have had timing rules that are more sort of, well, if I eat, then I have to wait 3 hours or whatever it is the timing rule is before I eat again. And so then they actually get stressed if they eat late, because then they feel like they have to push everything back, or they have to try and wiggle things out, or they have to miss something in order to not eat too frequently. So timing rules can just be all over the shop. And it usually turns into that little bit of an OCD component as well. So the only way that you challenge timing rules is by taking control of them. And what I mean by that is you have to recognize whatever it is that the rule wants you to do is what you then have to strive to not do, very purposefully not do. So if you do have that sort of timing rule where you have to leave X amount of time between eating, guess what you do? You don't leave X amount of time between eating, and you inject some food right into the middle of it just to piss your timing rule off. And if, like me, you have the timing rule where you're just always trying to push back eating, guess what you do? You don't allow yourself to push back eating. In fact, you purposefully force yourself to eat earlier. And I hated doing that, because if I knew if I ate earlier, then I'd still be hungry later, and that would result in me eating more food overall in the day. But guess what? If you're in recovery, you're supposed to be eating without restriction, so more food is good, right? Rafi also says, I'm really challenging sitting more instead of standing, but standing is still my norm. And it's exactly the same thing, Rafi. You have to force your bottom onto the chair. And I don't care how much you don't want to sit down, and I don't care what excuses your brain makes up about, oh, I should stand. I don't care about any of it. You have to wake up every day and you have to set yourself the challenge of, I am going to sit down as much as possible. If there is any way that I can get through my day by not leaving a seat, then I'm going to do that. Get one of those wheelie chairs that they have in offices so you can just wheel yourself from whatever you're watching Netflix to the kitchen to get a snack and then wheel yourself back. Take it to the extreme. Often I found that if I take breaking a rule to the extreme, it's actually easier because then it becomes a little bit like playing a game and it doesn't feel quite as scary. So don't try and sit more. Force yourself, like turn it into, I'm going to sit as much as possible. Get obsessive about it. Like track yourself on those stupid fucking phones that my husband now makes me wear in case I fall off a horse. And by the way, so he gets me this watch, which I already had one before and I never wore it, so I didn't like it. But then he got me another one because these new ones now have this thing, is probably meant for quite old people, that if you fall over and don't move, it calls the ambulance. And so now he's making me wear this the whole time because he's worried I'm going to fall off a horse, which is a legitimate concern. It happens. But anyway, and then yesterday I wasn't even doing anything. I was just walking along and it starts bleeping at me, "You've had a fall. Should I call the ambulance?" And I'm like, don't fucking call the ambulance. Like, calling the ambulance in America is bloody expensive. And then it wouldn't let me not, wouldn't like turn off. And I'm like, who's going to fucking call the ambulance? Anyway, in the end, I managed to get it to turn off. But that's a complete digression. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, you could use something like this. You know, some of these things, I think it's turned off on this one. I didn't set this up, Matt did, but like I told him to take off all the health stuff because I hate that shit. And but I think you can get it where it's like tells you how much you sit and how much you stand. If you insist on having that shit in your life, then make it so that you get up every day. I'm like, I'm going to sit as much as possible, you motherfucker, and do that. Turn it into that. Honestly, the better advice is just to disable that shit on your phone. But you know what I'm talking about. Like, turn it to the extreme. Get up every morning and be like, it is my mission in life to sit as much as possible and stand and walk as little as possible. That's actually you're going to find that easier than if you just wake up and sort of go like, I'm going to try and sit less today or more today. Anyway, all right. Madeline. Oh, I think this is a continuation from Madeline's question. Oh, mechanism. Talked about that one. Oh, God, it's jumped and now I've lost my place. I'm going to pick one from random. Ashley says, do you have any advice on how to cope with tons of stretch marks? I'm not trying to pay attention, but it's obviously showing me that I'm continuing to gain weight, even though I don't use a scale anymore. Stretch marks are just part of life. Like, everybody has them. And I think especially people that have had children will tell you that they have them. But like, it's just like, who cares? Honestly, who cares? And unless you're running around in a boob tube, then really, who cares? And even if you are running around in a boob tube and you've got stretch marks, who cares? Like, it's just that sort of thing that you do have to force yourself, kicking and screaming, to give less fucks about, because it's not important. It doesn't fucking matter. Everybody has them. So therefore, no one else is judging anyone that has stretch marks, because everybody has stretch marks, as you know, at some point in your life due to something. And so it's just like, you have to turn that part of your brain off. You have to work out how to turn that part of your brain off. And there's different ways of doing that. Yes, absolutely ignoring them can be one thing. Or another thing could be to force yourself to look at them and touch them and play with them and just be like, this is a part of me and every part of me is important and every part of me is like something unique and wonderful to me and it makes up me and me is good. Shy adventurer. Could talk about the embarrassment of buying unhealthy foods. I often go to several different supermarkets to buy groceries so that no one notices how many treats I buy. Oh my God, Shy, I promise you, no one cares. I felt like the theme of today just needs to be give fewer fucks. Give fewer fucks. No one cares. Now you're making up stuff. You're making up that anybody is looking in your shopping basket and having the single thought about it, because you know what? They're not. They're thinking about all of their own stuff in their own lives that's going on right now. They are not walking around the supermarket and just being like, well, I'm going to look in random people's shopping baskets just so I can judge them. Like, that's not a pastime. That's not fun. People don't do that. And what you've got to sort of really get into your head and understand is that when you have an eating disorder, you are hyper obsessive about what everybody else is eating. So sure, when you have an eating disorder, you're walking around looking what everybody else is buying. But guess what? When you don't have an eating disorder, you're not hyper obsessive about what everybody else is eating and food in general. And so you're not walking around the supermarket worrying about what everybody else has got in their shopping trolley. It's not that you're not worrying. You're walking around the supermarket worrying about all sorts of things, probably worrying about what the kids are doing at home, and probably worrying about whether your husband's having an affair or not, and probably worrying about whether you're going to get fired tomorrow. But one thing that you are not worrying about is what other people have in their shopping baskets, because there's so many other things that are more important as far as your brain is concerned to worry about. When you have an eating disorder, your brain is really hyper focused on food. That is the most important thing in the world to it because it doesn't have enough of it. And so therefore, that's why it's all up in everybody else's business about what sort of food they've got. But that's one of the joys of completely recovering, is your brain is no longer hyper focused on food. And so therefore, you're not worrying about food anymore. You're just worrying about all the other stuff that everybody else is worrying about. So you, even if other people were all walking around judging what's in your shopping basket, then that's up to you to control your reaction to that. Like, you can't control other people. You can only control your reaction. And what's happening right now is you are allowing yourself to believe these stories that your brain is telling you, and you are allowing yourself to agree with them. And I tell you how you're agreeing with them is because you are acting as if they are true. You are acting as if it is true that if you have a shopping basket full of sweets, that's a bad thing. And the way that you're acting as if it's true is by your behavior of going and shopping in multiple different spaces to avoid that. That's acting as if what your brain is telling you is true. So therefore, because you're confirming via your actions what your brain is telling you, guess what's going to happen? It's going to keep telling you that because you are confirming that that is true. And another thing that you probably have to think hard about is also, is this part of an exercise compulsion? I think it probably is. If it was me, that's the sort of shit that I'd do as well. I'd make up a story that would be the reason why I had to walk to 10 different stores that day to do one by like 5 measly things. It was more about actually the sort of system I had of making sure that if I was going to buy something, I had to walk around all these stores. So bear that in mind as well. You've probably got some sort of movement compulsion that's playing into that is making the process of the simple process of shopping for food massively more complicated, massively more time consuming, and massively more stressful than it needs to be. And I have a client in 3 minutes, so I've got to go. Bye.